Way back in October 2019, Google released this phone right here, the Google Pixel 4 and the Google Pixel 4 XL. The last top tier Google phone until 2021, if you can believe it, when they re-entered the flagship market with the Pixel 6 Pro. So what caused Google to stop making flagships for so long? Did this phone deserve all the bad press that it got? And what does the future hold for the Pixel 4 series? Hi, my name's Ross and this is a look back at one of my favourite Google Pixel phones. We have to kick this off by talking about the design. For me, this is the best looking Pixel phone there's ever been. And I know that can be controversial because the Google Pixel 2 XL, the Panda version, holds the top spot for most people. But my list goes to Pixel 4, then the 2 XL. It's a very close second place. What I like about the design is that it keeps a lot of the Google friendliness that we all love, while getting a classy new design, a little bit more professional looking. The matte black side rails contrast against this frosted white back, giving it that Panda look. And if there's a Panda design Pixel, you can guarantee I'm picking it. Clearly white is the official name for this colourway. The orange one, oh so orange I think it was called, also looked pretty sick. That'd be my second choice for this phone. It did have a coloured power button as well, but it was a bit on the muted side, compared to this white version that has a super bright one. The black version of this phone actually has a glossy back, whereas the white and the orange one have this frosted finish to it. The frosted back is actually great, it keeps the fingerprints to a minimum compared to the glossy one, which is like a fingerprint magnet. There are 2 speaker ports along the bottom either side of this USB-C port, and they are stereo speakers with the earpiece being a speaker as well. The small Google logo at the bottom keeps everything looking super clean. Super clean because we're missing something back here, the fingerprint scanner. The secret to where the fingerprint scanner went lies on the front of the phone. If we turn the phone over, we're greeted with this huge forehead. Not really an upgrade from the Pixel 3 XL's bathtub notch, but they did pack some serious tech in there. A selfie camera, an infrared projector, a receiver, and Soli, amongst other things that we will get into. It gave us 3D face unlock, one of the fastest face unlocks of all time. If anything, it was a bit too good. If you had it face up on your desk, it would just keep unlocking throughout the day. You didn't need to be looking directly at it, it would just unlock. And when it first launched, you didn't even need to have your eyes open to unlock it. Super secure. In fact, you still don't need to have your eyes open. Anyway, it's true 3D face unlock, but it does have its drawbacks. You can't count on it being accepted with all your apps and services because some places just don't accept this kind of face unlock. Let's talk about one of the things Google made a real big fuss about when announcing this phone. Soli was introduced to the Pixel 4 line as a hands-free way to interact with your phone. However, after it not working half the time, most people just gave up on it and it didn't make it into future phones. If I remember rightly, the key things it was used for was for like swapping tracks by swiping your hand over the screen, then you could snooze an alarm by putting your hand over it. It's a really hard thing to get a hang of. Some days I feel like, yeah, I've got this now, and then it just stops working again. I think it was intended for when your hands are messy and you don't want to be touching your screen. But I was washing the dishes and I just swiped to change the track and I just got water and bubbles all over my phone, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. Needless to say, it was seen as a bit of a gimmick and didn't catch on. I'm not sure why they tried this because a few companies had tried similar stuff before and it also didn't catch on. Why they thought this would be different, I really don't know. One small thing to mention here is the phone's IP68 water resistant. And one big thing to mention, you still have the squeeze for assist feature. The fastest and best way to summon the Google Assistant. That feature should never have left Pixels. Google, if you're listening, please bring it back. Now let's talk about the front of this phone, the good and the bad. And there's definitely stuff to be happy about here. In between the massive forehead and the slim chin is a smooth 90Hz refresh rate display. Kind of. It's a variable refresh rate, meaning it switches between 60Hz and 90Hz depending on what's needed. But in reality, it was nearly always 60Hz. You can dig deep into the settings and force it to be 90Hz all the time, but I think Google did it because it was just a bit of a drain on the battery life. Because this phone on 90Hz all the time will not see you through the day. It'll just eat through that battery. Now, time for the bad news. It's not the brightest of screens, 444 nits, and that's painful to say in 2023. Indoors, you're not going to have any problems with this, but as soon as you go outside, it's a different story. Even when you've got it on max brightness, you're going to struggle if you're in direct sunlight. I've noticed when I go outside, even on an overcast day, it just bumps itself straight up to max brightness. But back in time when curving screens were all the rage, Google stuck with a flat screen. And if I had my way, to be honest, it'd be flat screens on everything. And it seems like a lot of people agree because more and more of the top phones are going back to these flat displays. When it comes to gesture navigation, they're just better. Even though curved screens are getting much better at rejecting accidental touches, I just much prefer a flat display. In fact, I actively avoid phones that do have a curved display. Let's talk about battery life on this thing. If you think 3700 mAh isn't enough to run a 90Hz display, the Soli chip and a screen at full brightness all the time, you're right. If you think that's bad, then spare a thought for the Pixel 4 XL's little brother, the Pixel 4. With a 2800 mAh battery, I can't in good faith say that that's a good phone to pick up in 2023. If you love the design, go for the XL model. It's the only way to get a reasonable, in quotation marks, battery life for this iteration of the Pixel. I think that Google had the Apple mentality with this, where they want to make the software so good and efficient that it didn't need a big battery, but then forgot about all the power-hungry upgrades they were making. So the next section, the reason most of us buy Pixels, the reason I buy Pixels, the reason I bought my first Pixel. The camera. Well, cameras, plural. The Pixel 4 got a dual camera system for the first time. When I heard that Pixels were getting a second camera lens, I was super excited, but that excitement was short-lived. It had a 12 megapixel main wide camera and a 2x telephoto lens. Why they picked a telephoto when everybody wanted an ultra-wide is, I don't know what it is. What were you up to, Google? Every follow-up phone had a wide and an ultra-wide, so at least they learned a lesson. Even at the time, it was seen as a weird choice to go for a telephoto as a second lens. Here's a variety of photos I took with these cameras so you can get a good idea of the quality. There's no surprise these are great. If you're looking for an easy point and shoot camera on your phone, then this is hard to beat for what you can pick one of these up for now. With two lenses on the back, you'd expect some good portrait photos. The Pixel 3 knocked these out of the park, so we should expect nothing less from the 4. And yeah, I was able to get some really nice depth on these. But when it came to the front-facing cameras, it's like every other photo seemed to have a hard time separating me from the background. Really struggling with hair, it looks like there's some leaves behind my ear, but there actually wasn't. Putting a hat on seemed to help. When it comes to video on this phone, it's limited to 4K 30 frames a second. Google did come out and say that 4K 60 will be taking up too much space on the phone, which isn't great because plenty of phones were doing 4K 60 frames per second at the time, but I guess it's nice they were transparent about it. If you do really need those extra FPS, you can always do 1080p at 60 frames. Just to set some expectations, this camera doesn't compare to the Pixel 6 and Pixel 7 Pros, but it's still a great camera. As you've just heard me ramble about some of the good points and bad points of this phone when it was launched, it's time we talked about the controversies that plagued this phone the year after the launch. It's not a problem that I ever saw myself, but expanding batteries were not just a Samsung problem. This phone had that problem too. The problem that expanding batteries give you is that it pushes the back glass off the phone, and smartphone batteries can cause serious issues if they get ruptured, and they can even explode. Not what you want in your pocket. Samsung seem to have a wider problem with this. This is the only Pixel I've heard of having this problem. One of the most confusing things with this phone is that it won't be getting Android 14. The last update is Android 13. It's handled Android 13 just fine and definitely has the power to take on another update. The 4A is getting it, given you could get a 4A 5G model. The Pixel 4 doesn't have 5G connectivity, so maybe it's something to do with that. I have a Pixel 5 as well, and Android 13 works fine on both of these. The Snapdragon 855 chip was a flagship standard chip at the time, but today it's more of a low middle range chip. It's a better chip than the 5, the 4A 5G and the Pixel 5A have though. The Pixel 5A is going to be supported until 2024, and it's likely if the Pixel 4 was also supported that long that it would actually run better. The Google Pixel 4 has 6GB of RAM, and that might not seem like enough if you have lots of apps open, and it has been known to close apps down in the background from time to time. For someone who isn't a power user though, I doubt you'd run into that problem. That was a regular thing on the Pixel 3 though, so Google have made a conscious effort to reduce that right down. The Google Pixel 4 and 4 XL were launched on Android 10. It came with a few upgrades like call screening, which is still my favourite feature to this day. Live captions were moved onto the phone itself, so they were much faster and just much better. And also the new Google Assistant. The limited space on the 64GB model might cause you some issues if you have some chunky games on your phone. Given that Android now requires 13GB, that leaves you with a tiny 51GB for games, apps, photos and videos. You might have to start relying on cloud storage. By the time Android 11 came out, the Pixel 4 and the Pixel 4 XL were much better phones for it. But the damage was already done. The "we'll fix that later" attitude, coupled with the battery oversight and nearly useless Soli radar, meant this phone could never really live up to what Pixel fans wanted. The Pixel 4 XL specifically is aged much better than the Pixel 4, and I would happily use this today following all the tweaks and tuning that it's got, even if I will be disappointed it doesn't get the next update. If you do have an older phone and you want some tips to get the most out of it, then this video on screen now, that's the video for you. I'll see you over there.